we've trained women that being just a mother is somehow a failure. And so we don't have reverence for motherhood and the matriarch in the way that we used to. And we tell women to wait until they experience life and have sex with lots of guys and go out and do big things in the world. And then the second one is we have a massive amount of agrochemicals in our food, in our water, and it is causing massive problems with our fertility.
Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome to the Best You podcast. My name is Nick Carrier, body optimization coach and creator of the 10-Week Transformation. The mission of the show is to help you get closer to the best version of yourself in all areas so that you can live a more meaningful and impactful life. Today's episode features Mollie Engelhart. Mollie used to be a vegan chef based in California, and now she's a regenerative farmer in Texas. Kind of a 180. Man, does she have some stories for you. Like I said, she's a regenerative farmer. She's a chef, an entrepreneur, a mother of four, and author of a new book that's coming out called Debunked by Nature: How a Vegan Chef Turned Regenerative Farmer Discovered that Mother Nature is Conservative. I'm going to tell you, Mollie is a badass. She brings a bold conversation about health, food, family, and kind of the system that we live in society. She shares what it's really like raising 4 kids under the age of 10, working on a farm. She shared about why she left behind a vegan lifestyle and how nature itself changed her worldview. We also dive deep into important topics like declining birth rates, the disconnection from nature in our modern life, and her candid thoughts on the Make America Healthy Again movement. Buckle up for this one. Mollie is awesome. For now, it's time to get closer to your best you. Let's dive in. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Best You podcast. Today, I am super excited to be joined by the one and only Mollie Engelhart. This is the second time I've had Mollie on the podcast. Had her on about a year ago, and it was really the first conversation that I have kind of had with a farmer and got some insight into what actually goes on a farm, what regenerative farming actually looks like and actually means compared to regular farming. And super excited that Mollie is launching her first book, I believe, Debunked by Nature: How a Vegan Chef Turned Regenerative Farmer Discovered that Mother Nature is Conservative. So we're going to get into a lot of different topics today that I'm super excited about. Mollie, welcome back. I was not expecting to start off the podcast like this, but you just said, you've got a couple of young kids, your nephew's 6 years old as well. What's it like having a farm with a bunch of young kids around?
It's awesome. I've been speaking a lot about this recently because there's like a lot of talk about what the traditional woman is, a trad wife versus the working woman. And there's a movement to move away from feminism. And then there's a movement to hold on to feminism. And there's a lot of conversations out there. And I think that both of the conversations are kind of missing some nuance. And it's not normal to leave your wife at home for 8 hours of workday and an hour on each other side of commute. And she's home with the kids for 10 hours a day. That's not traditional. That might have came through the Industrial Revolution and was like a thing at that point. But prior to that, there was always a home industry: the candle maker, the shoemaker, the baker, the flour grinder, like whatever different people were, the miller, not the flour grinder. And then the man and the woman and the children were all in this enterprise, and the kids were underfoot. And that was happening. And I actually think that that's the natural state of being of a family. And so we've made intentional decisions in our life to have a life where our kids can be with us. We have help taking care of the kids for sure. I have 4 kids under 10 years old. So obviously I cannot do all that and everything else I do. But if someone falls and scrapes their knee, if there's an issue, they literally can just call me on the walkie-talkie. Somebody needs to, some co-regulating, come up here, and I can be there to do that. So I think it's awesome. You might come to my restaurant on the farm and sit down and order a meal, and my kids will bluster into the restaurant with hay stuck to their hair and order some pancakes and run around and wipe off a table or two and beg for a cookie and then off out into the wild again. And I think that that is a more natural state for the family where the whole family is working towards one end rather than this idea of, the woman stays at home and she's overwhelmed and doesn't have adult conversation, and the man is kind of disconnected and does the work thing and is carrying all that by himself. I think this is a more natural state of being. And I think this is the trad wife, or that we should be going for, the trad family that we should be going for, is that we're all together in an enterprise. There's all these influencers that are like big trad wives that are happening on the internet. So
Yeah.
Hannah from Ballerina Farms would be one of them. And so they've gotten very popular showing their life at home. And then there's people, judging other people and saying that they're oppressed, and having seven children
Yeah.
is oppressive, and blah, 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 blah. And I think that both conversations are kind of missing.
Yeah. So you feel like the more natural state of being, is it a matter of the whole family working towards one particular goal? Is it a matter of the kids kind of being around a parent or both parents while they're working and while they're kind of doing the supporting? What do you feel like is the most natural state of
Both.
being?
I think it's natural for you to be in relationship with your husband, not away from him 10 hours a day and then sleep, then you eat a meal and go to sleep, and then he's gone 10 hours a day again. And then I also think it's natural for the kids to be in the room, I mean, my kids were just asking me the other day about mortgages. And then they were like, so why wouldn't you just buy the whole house? Because that seems crazy how much more money you're going to pay. And then I said, oh, well, we didn't have that much money at one time. And they said, oh, well, you should have saved more and then just bought it because it would have been better. And I said, yeah, that would be better. That is, but I didn't save. Mommy didn't always make the best decisions about money. And then now they're asking, how much do we pay every month for the car? And I say, oh, $1,100 or whatever. Well, how much was the car if you buy it all together? And then I say, oh, 75,000 or whatever. And then they say, okay, but how much are you going to pay by paying every month? And then we do the math.
Yeah.
And they're interested about it. And I think that that comes from being in this environment where we're talking about leverage. We're talking about what things, just yesterday we were talking about a tractor that we have that's worth $100,000. And my husband said, are we going to have to sell it? And I said, not yet, but it's definitely in the back of my mind if life goes a certain way. And then the kids were like, well, how much did you pay for it when
they're all obsessed with with loans and how much you're paying in interest and all that kind of stuff.
I think that's great. And they each have some entrepreneur doing. My one son makes a hair oil for the farm store. My nephew that has the sprained ankle makes these cross necklaces. And there's other little things in the store, some Muppets made out of reclaimed wool that are like for taking pots out of the oven. And so they're doing these little projects and trying to sell things. And they're, having, my son has his own garden right now. And he's like, well, when these vegetables are done, I'm going to sell them to you to sell in the restaurant. I said, okay, great. So they're learning. I said, but are you going to rent the space from me? Because I own the space. And he's like, and then, we have to learn these things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that more natural state of being allows you to have more kind of adult conversations and more real life scenarios and real life conversations around things that allow them to mature maybe a little bit more quickly and understand some concepts more quickly because they're around it and everything like that. That's really cool. That's really cool. To actually, I wasn't going to go there this quickly, but you mentioned in the conversation with your kids about how you didn't have the money to buy the farm outright, and so there's a mortgage. And I know back in, I think it was 2020, when you kind of started to have this feeling and people were bringing it up in conversation about like you should move to Texas. But you were like, what do you mean I should move to Texas? And then you, long story short, kind of go to Texas, find this place that's kind of like a ragtag type place. There's no way this can be the place that we should get. Let me a little bit deeper inside of your own head. First off, a lot of the stories in the book are just so good, just so raw, so real, and so relatable. And this is one of them. So you guys need to make sure you get the book Debunked by Nature. But let me into your own head where you were during that period of time in California when you had this kind of like feeling that you should get this house and buy this farm in Texas. Why did you end up pulling the trigger on that decision?
At first I just was ignoring the signs, and then, it just kept coming up and coming up. So I decided to go look in Texas. And then my ego, I'm still like, I'm a chef and I'm a there. Like I had all this ego stuff. Like I just couldn't even imagine like moving to Texas. And I was a LA person. And then I started finding some places that were like close to San Antonio or close to Austin and they had restaurants already built on them. And I was like, oh, I could do this. And then those all fell through. And I did not want this place. It was not finished. The house was not finished. It was not what I wanted for a house. It smelled like sewage. They did not vent the septic correctly. And so I just came, looked, and I was like, okay, we're good to go on this one. We're not going to get this one. And I woke up at 4 in the morning, just boom, out of bed. And the next morning in the Airbnb in San Antonio, I was like, go back to Bandera. And I thought, I got woke up before at 4 in the morning for other things. The first Bitcoin I ever bought was like shot out of bed, buy Bitcoin right now. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
And so I knew that I'd had good experiences with the 4 a.m. shot out of bed thing. So I went downstairs because I just wanted to be on my phone and not wake up my husband or my kids. And so since I was like not gonna go back to sleep right then, and my dad's making tea, and I said, Dad, what are you doing down here? And he said, I just got shot out of bed and it said, go stick a shovel in the field in Bandera. Go back and feel the soil, feel the field, and see if this is where you're meant to be. And I thought, well, I guess we're going to Bandera. Let's call the realtor and tell her we're changing our plans today. And then it was too expensive. And it turned out it was 56 acres smaller than they thought it was. So they had to lower the price. They were super annoyed about that. And all these things that just kept happening and happening. And I don't want to like tell all the story, but that to miss out on the book. But ultimately, I knew I was being called here. And still, it's not like it's all worked out so amazing and I'm just like a millionaire over here. I'm still like in a very different financial place than I was in 2020. And I'm here in radical faith, looking up, saying, God, okay, I'm here. This is where you want me to be. This is where you're serving. And I'm just trusting. I'm out here on the skinny benches, believing that this is where I'm meant to serve. And all the abundance of the earth is ours to experience. And there is a reason, and I can't see it. And I'm just going to keep being here and serving. And in LA, people thought I was a radical left, radical conservative, right? Like a racist conservative radical. And here people are like, think I'm a liberal or think I'm a pagan. I don't, you know what I mean? Like it's not, there's no
Yeah.
perfect place to be, but I know that this is where I'm meant to be. This is the community I'm meant to be serving, and I'm doing that obediently and, in faith.
Yeah, totally. I love it. Yeah. We discussed it a little bit last time you were on the podcast about how basically, like I mentioned in the intro and like you have in the kind of subtitle of your book, you were a vegan chef turned regenerative farmer, and talked a little bit about kind of that transition. You watched a TED Talk that really talked about what is actually going on with the environment. And so I know that me and a lot of other people hear a bunch of people talk about how the climate is changing, the earth is going to hell, and all these things are wrong with our earth and the environment and stuff like that. Like what is the truth? What is going on with our earth? What's going on with climate change? Like what is the actual issue that is going on with our planet and the health of our planet?
So this may sound so crazy to people that believe the current um, climate change paradigm. But I believe that climate change, as the way it has been fed to us, is a tool of separation. And so many things I believe right now are a tool of separation. I think race as a construct is a tool of separation that's used regularly, I think. But climate change
I mean, it's like meaning like used as a tool to like divide people.
divide people.
Yeah.
And so I think that the underlying message, the green message is you, man, humans, not man like men,
Right.
biological man, but all humans are a plague on the planet, a pestilence, a this thing that is destroying something that is perfect and beautiful, and that you don't belong here. And that's the underlying thing. And the reason the powers that be, that we, the people, must make be the powers that were, want us to believe that is think about what's happening to us. The real thing that's happening to the earth is we're being poisoned. There's ecosystem collapse. But this is largely chemical. This is largely a chemical issue. And the reason regenerative agriculture, which is arguably the best climate change tool that we have, is not largely talked about everywhere, is nobody can get rich. And everybody likes to think like, oh, the Republicans are the ones that are in bed with industry. But we saw by the pandemic, like it just went from one party to the other, and everybody is in bed with industry. And so the solar industry, the wind industry, they can't be profitable without subsidies. They are not good for the environment. They're not good for humanity. I mean, the solar panel supply chain and the batteries that are attached to solar have child labor, slave labor, you know, indentured servitude because of religious persecution, all attached to it. And we largely ignore that while we argue about microaggressions over here. So it's obvious that the green agenda that is being fed to us is not actually for the planet. I have a neighbor that bought this beautiful place. It's their retirement. They put all this money into it. They made it self-sufficient. They did a greenhouse and chicken coop and cross fence so they could move their cows around the property. And they bought a portion of a much bigger ranch that was thousands of acres. I think they bought hundreds of acres of thousands of acres, and or maybe 100 acres. A solar farm went in all the way around them, bought all the rest of the ranch. And the solar farm had to spray these chemicals to keep the dust down while they were installing. And those chemicals have contaminated their well and their ponds that feed their livestock to the point where they can't graze their livestock on their land anymore. And so I think we have to look at, why do we think that a solar panel or a windmill or a Tesla Cybertruck is somehow the solution and my cow is the problem? Because if my cow dies on the field tomorrow and I just do nothing, it'll smell for a couple of weeks and then there'll be only bones. And then in a couple of months, there'll be nothing except for maybe the head, the biggest parts of the bones. Yeah. So, and then that will eventually turn into calcium into the soil eventually. So explain to me how something that goes back into nothing could be the problem, and something that is never going to go away, has no option but to become landfill, and has all of this trauma in the supply chain is the solution. Yeah. It's totally doesn't work. Yeah. But by having us believe that there's this, someone's handling it out there and we just need to rage against fossil fuels, and then it's really okay that we're being poisoned to death because we're bad. We're destroying it. And so I want to open, I want you guys to try on this idea that I'm going to say, and it's radical. What if you belong here? What if you are as much part of nature as the bison and the hawk and the wolf? What if you are actually the keystone species and you have forgotten? What if the fact that the microbiology in the soil is 73% the same as the DNA in the microbiology in the soil is 73% the same as the DNA in a healthy gut? So if you believe in the Bible or you believe in science, we are meant to be part of nature. So the Bible says God picked up soil and made Adam. And then the first thing he asked him to do was tend to the garden. And if you're a scientist, then you know you're meant to eat of the soil. We're not meant to eat sterile food and sterile packaging coming and having this industrial microbiome. And what if nature is this beautiful reflection of creation or science, whichever you believe, the Fibonacci spirals in all of it, and it's in us. So we're part of the whole of it. What if we feel so alone and so disconnected because the little piece of God that's in all of us, our microbiology, trust your gut. No, go with your gut. Your gut instinct is going to tell you is so devoid of that colony that is meant to be there that we feel like we don't belong. And since we feel like we don't belong, we disconnect. But we don't need to disconnect. We need to integrate. We don't need to dominate. We need to be part of. And that And so what I want everybody to wake up that listens to your podcast
Yeah.
and whatever the best version of you is like you belong here. Whether science puts you here or God puts you here, you belong and you get to be the best cell in the body. But that has to mean reconnecting with your food, reconnecting with a local farmer, having the small farm diet be at least a percentage of your diet, going to natural places, putting your feet on the soil, breathing in diverse different ecosystems, because we have an industrial microbiome that has us have forgotten that we are part of that whole. And we need to remember, sorry, that was my husband slamming a door. We need to remember that we get to choose how this goes. And the plains and the 15 feet of deep soil that was the breadbasket of America was not on accident. Native cultures burned and moved bison through herd pressure and hunting them and burned the grass. And then the bison came back. And the old thinking was that the indigenous people followed the bison, but no, the bison followed the burns of the indigenous people, and then they were able to harvest them. The old mind is that the Amazon rainforest is because some monkeys pooped out some seeds. No, it was a co-creation, and people were eating certain vines, and certain vines were medicine, and they were integrating it all together. I mean, think about that. We still have Achuar tribes living in the jungle untouched by humanity. I've gone and spent time and done ceremony down there. That is a co-creation, and we are meant to co-create, whether you believe in science or God. And so the green scam has us forgotten, and then we're not acting as the keystone species on the planet, and we are. And when we talk about the wolf and we talk about the beaver and we talk about these other keystone species and we want to protect them, we need to protect ourselves. We don't even have a 1.6 children per a female in all Western nations. Not a single Western nation is at replacement rate. We have forgotten our purpose.
And I mean, first off, mic drop from all of that. Second off, it is wild how low the birth rate has become below replacement. Like at some point, the population is going to drop immensely, and
It is dropping immensely.
yeah,
The average sperm count has dropped by 50% since the 70s. And they believe that all Western nations will be at a 0% sperm on average. Obviously, some will have sperm, but on average, a 0% sperm count by 2040.
Obviously there's a lot of reasons for this, but what do we uh, maybe the green agenda, the green message, whatever you want to call it, is maybe part of this reason. Why do we think that birth rates have gone down so dramatically over the last number of decades?
I'd say five things. So,
Okay, you've never thought about this before.
number one, we've trained women that being just a mother is somehow a failure.
Mm.
And so we don't have reverence for motherhood and the matriarch in the way that we used to. And we tell women to wait until they experience life and have sex with lots of guys and go out and do big things in the world. And then the second one is we have a massive amount of agrochemicals in our food, in our water, and it is causing massive problems with our fertility. We know atrazine can make boy frogs into reproductive girl frogs. We know these chemicals are wreaking havoc on other species. And we know that that is causing problems. We know that plastic is massively endocrine interrupting, and everything comes in plastic. Everything from your organic butternut squash to your juice to your organic latte, all is coming in a plastic cup. So plastic, and then we don't always think of polyester as plastic, but if you're wearing polyester against your reproductive parts or any part of your body, but they did a study with dogs where they put dogs in pants, 100% cotton, 50-50, and and 100% polyester. And it was like 73% drop in fertility for the dogs that had polyester pants on. So we don't always think of plastic in that way. Abortion and as a form of birth control, or just the abortion being very acceptable in our culture. In fact, it's people celebrate it. You see reels like celebrate your abortion, tell your abortion story, it's okay. So that in something that was supposed to be rare and in cases of emergency and all of that has become commonplace. And vasectomies, I would say, is in that same category. And then metabolic health. And so our packaged food system, our food like products, we all have our epigenetics. We have our genetic traits that are there. And then we have our epigenetics. And we don't talk about epigenetics enough, but epigenetics is the genes that get turned on or turned off based on the microbiology, the micronutrients, and really what you're taking into the tiny little carburetors in your cells turn off and turn on different things. So you've heard statistics like native people can't drink as much as white people, or black people are more susceptible to type 2 diabetes, and we've heard these statistics. So it's they can't do anything about it because it is genetic. A lot of white people have the cancer, like ovarian and breast cancer cell, and like their people are preemptively taking their breasts off and taking out their uterus because they have that genetic trait. Well, what I want to say is yes, but Weston A. Price proved a long time ago that when people are eating of their local environment, they're eating food the way nature intended it to be, whether it was mostly a carbohydrate diet of yams or mostly a diet of blubber all the way up into Alaska. Everybody had perfectly straight teeth. They were not having these traits. And then as soon as you add seed oils, processed flour, instead of just grinding the flour from scratch, is what I mean. And then refined sugars, the epigenetics turns on these genes. So my husband is indigenous from Oaxaca, Mexico, and if you go to his village, I was there recently for a funeral, and it's a village where women don't wear pants, and so everybody's wearing a skirt. You can see everybody's ankles, and I was sitting at the funeral watching and seeing the spots of diabetes on all of the women's ankles, and the metabolic dysfunction that was showing up in their ankles.
Wow.
And so are they genetically predisposed to it? Yes. When the road from the outside world did not come to there until 1991. When my husband was a kid, nobody had diabetes. Nobody was having cancer. Now the cancer rates are rampant and the diabetes rates are off the chains. And I know my husband, I know for a fact, like he struggles with like his kidney and liver health. Just eat, and he eats pretty clean, and he drinks some, but he doesn't drink a lot. But I know that it impacts him more, and then other things might impact me more. But the truth is, if we're eating the foods the way they were created, whether you're eating carbs or you're eating meats or you're eating dairy or there's tribes that largely just eat blood and milk mixed together. Sounds gross to me, but and they're totally healthy. So these metabolic conditions are largely from our epigenetics and what's getting turned on and off. And our food system is turning on those things. And so back to the fertility thing, when we have type 2 diabetes, I mean, like POCS or whatever that's called, where women are having trouble, is essentially a diabetic condition or a pre-diabetic condition. When our metabolic health is not great, then our body is not primed to want to reproduce. This is the same. I had a cow that I thought was pregnant, and she must have lost the pregnancy, but we were feeding her extra rations as if she was pregnant. And then she got very obese, and then we bred her because we were like, oh, she's not pregnant, but we should not have bred her until she lost weight, because she got all types of conditions that even humans can get, like having edema while she was pregnant, swelling in the legs, and all these things that were happening. Well, that was essentially, she was not in metabolic health because she had gotten obese with the extra forage that we had given her. And so I say that to say, it happens in nature, it happens anywhere, that if you're not healthy, it's harder to carry a baby to term. And so she had problems. And then she lost the weight after she did give birth to a baby. And through milking, nursing the baby and us milking her, she lost the weight. And then, and the vet had told us, don't ever breed that cow again. She's not healthy enough to breed. And I was like, that's only her third baby. That's ridiculous that she's not healthy enough. She's 5 years old. And so we had her lose the weight, and now she's had many babies. We've had her since 2018, and so I don't even know how many babies she's had. And so really, it's that we're metabolically not healthy. And so I would say those are the five main things that are contributing. And then I would say the last thing, which was not one of the five, is we don't honor the holy trinity of mother, father, child in our society. And so I think there's a lot of people that are maybe not interested in having a baby alone and haven't really found.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that? We don't honor the holy trinity of mother, father, child, and the society.
Like, what's the divorce rate?
Oh, gotcha. That's what you mean. That's what you mean.
If what our role, like, I believe that's the holy trinity that keeps society
Right.
together, two-parent household. Um, and so I think that that is important. And when we don't have that, I think people opt out of having children. And statistically, we've shown that women raising children by themselves is not successful. No
Yeah.
matter how much we love our children, no matter how much we're there when the man is not there, and that is notable and extraordinary and is worth saying that women are largely the ones raising children by themselves. Statistically, children from a two-family household and children from a father-only household have better outcomes
Mm.
than, but unfortunately, it's not
Yeah.
women abandoning their children and men are
Yeah.
raising them by themselves. So, but a lot of people are not up for doing that by themselves and haven't found the partner that they feel they can trust to be there. And
Totally.
we look around and we have so many friends that are raising children by themselves. And when I talk to my sons, I'm relating to this being that I grew inside of me and pushed out of me and is a part of me and I love with everything, and I want to be gentle and I want to be soft. And my husband is always talking to the man that they will become, and I am always talking to the boy that they are. And that balance is necessary.
That gives me goosebumps to hear you say that. Have talked about for a number of years now how my parents, I always say that my dad 80% of the time cared about the future version of Nick, and my mom 80, 90, 100% of the time cared about the current version of Nick. And that balance is exactly what you need in a parenting duo. Now, does it have to be the father is always the future version and the mother is always the current version? No, it can be some other balance. Maybe generally that's just what it's going to be. But I think that's huge from a parenting duo. I think that's huge from any form of leadership. Making sure that you care both for the current version of the person and the future version of the person. I think that's important for self leadership. But no, I love
I
your.
heard a man recently, I can't remember his name, but he's a gay man having a family, and he was talking about creating that balance, like that it is harder,
Mm,
and in a same-sex marriage, you do have to create the one that is going to care for the current version and the one that's going to carry for the future version.
yeah.
You have to decide that, or whoever's most likely to do that, to make sure that the balance exists. And so
Totally. I mean, that's why, people that the phrase good cop, bad cop has existed for a long time. It's not exactly that, but like to an extent, that's, I feel like what that phrase to an extent insinuates is like one of the parents is going to be the one who's holding this the accountability, and the other one is maybe not to the same degree. But no, I love this. I guess to kind of almost dive deeper onto you mentioned how current society doesn't maybe honor as much the holy trinity of the father, the mother, the child, and that's kind of the cornerstone or the backbone of our society. I really feel like our society has values issues. We value things over people oftentimes. We value things like fame, prestige, money, and all these things. And some of these things aren't bad in and of themselves, but it like leads us to aspiring after different goals and having different goals that maybe don't connect us with who God created us to be. How do we get back to having different values? Like how can families get back to having different values? Do we need different leadership? Do we just need more people talking about it? How do we get back to having different values?
I'm big on the individual responsibility, which is not popular in this day and age. But I think I write a column for a newspaper that's called Epoch Times. It's like I write a couple times a week. And there's a joke, like people comment, like, "Oh, how's Molly going to bring this one back to soil and the health of food?" But I do really believe that being in nature, being related to how God's design works, like seeing that regularly and understanding that, and eating food that causes clarity, mental clarity, and physical clarity, and having a healthy microbiology, a healthy gut, and just health, like general health. And health can be also mental. What is the statistics on SSRIs in our culture? I don't know what it is, but it's crazy. And there's been studies showing that putting your hands in healthy soil is more effective as a mood enhancer
Wow, I would believe
than
it.
any SSRI. And so I really believe that we have a disconnection issue. So 40% of children in the United States are born by C-section. And so first things first, the very first microbiology that is meant to be set into the child should be coming out of the vagina over the butthole, and that squeezes into eyes, ears, nose, mouth, or all orifices, right? And then they get breastfed, and breastfeeding feeds the foundation. Now, does breast milk have the microbiology? No, but think of breast milk as making little houses, like setting up a planned community for all the colonies of microbiology to move into. It's like they put in this big massive planned community in your gut that sets up the housing for the microbiology. And then the baby starts putting stuff in their mouth and starts licking stuff and boogers and, what, all the stuff. The baby starts, there's an
Yeah.
age like 6 months to 8 months where everything's going in the mouth. And you start to freak out. Like, this is, what did they just picked up something off the floor? But honestly, that's all by design. Like, the baby is now introducing small amounts of all this stuff from its environment to create that microbiology. So 40% of people are being cut out of their mothers. And so the very first microbiology that they're getting introduced to is not the foundation that their mother made. And there is microbiology that lives in our colon that would be totally dangerous to have in our vaginas. It would cause massive infection. And right before you give birth, it migrates to your vagina. And then the birth flushes it out because everything comes out. But it is on purpose to get that microbiology into the baby. And then the baby's immune system is constantly talking to the breast. There's a communication loop between the saliva of the baby and the nipple. And so this idea that we think we could do that better with formula. So
Mm-hmm.
then formula is largely some version of milk solids and some version of corn syrup solids and vitamins, man-made vitamins. We can't do it better. We just can't. And so the microbiology that takes over with that foundation is totally different. And so we are completely disconnected from birth, from that perfection of God's design. And that sounds crazy to people, but I actually think that we will honor the way the world is meant to work if we're carrying a balance of the world in us.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
don't know that maybe I sound crazy, but people,
No, I was saying, yeah, we're more connected to it. We're connected with nature. We're more integrated with nature. We're doing things like you would say the natural way of being, and therefore it's going to shape us differently into valuing things differently and seeing things differently.
and this, um, like every mammal on the planet values water, food, reproduction, and some value shelter. Not all animals need shelter, but some value shelter. So think about, we've just basically gone
Yeah.
full out on shelter and comfort as an extension of shelter. So we want a comfortable job, we want everything to be comfortable. In fact, we recoil from discomfort. But to be human is to be uncomfortable. And also, how many ancestors had to fight, war, toil in the fields scratched for you to exist. And you're like, I think the planet's overpopulated. I'm not going to have any kids. And I really like going to Cabo. And I'm just, we're just into having fun. I don't know that I want to have the responsibility. Like,
Yes.
what? We've
I
forgotten
totally.
our purpose, like literally the purpose. And I say this from someone who didn't have her first child till just before she was 37 years old. I definitely could have missed the window. I definitely could have been with two cats living in my house in Granada Hills, California, in my golf course and floating in my pool and switching from guy to guy as they annoyed me and I moved on. Like that was totally possible. I was the feminist who believed my career could fill something, but it
Yeah.
can't. You cannot, there's no way that my career could give me the joy that holding my daughter can give me,
Yeah.
that watching my son help his nephew, who arguably it's his fault that his cousin has a sprained ankle, every day helping him get to the bathroom, getting to the car. We went to Costco, like we went all these places yesterday, and I was like, "We're really gonna bring Rumi with the sprained ankle?" And they were like, "Yes, like he's not gonna miss out." And watching
That's
them
awesome.
coalesce and take care of each other, nothing in my career, the highs or the lows. I made tons of money, and then where's that money now? It's not going with me when I die. And the only thing that we leave is our legacy of our thoughts and our speech and our belief and our actions and our attitudes that we put into the world that become a ripple effect. And the people that we leave behind is
Yeah.
the only legacy we have.
Yeah. Totally. Totally. Well, I want to make sure we get a little bit into the farming stuff. No, 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 no. You're good. You're good. This was great. I steered the conversation that way, and for specific reasons, and so I'm glad we touched on it. But I do want to just briefly, for people who are familiar with the term regenerative farming, but they don't necessarily know a ton about what it means. How would you describe the difference between a regenerative farm versus a regular farm? And like you mentioned earlier, how a regenerative farm is the best possible way to fight against whatever's going on with our planet, right? And so, give us the insight of what's the difference between a regenerative farm and a regular farm, and why is it so important for our planet?
So, regenerative agriculture is the practice of prioritizing the soil and soil health. We've talked about it for the last several minutes in relationship to human health. But soil health itself determines how much water is brought down to the aquifer, how healthy the soil is, how healthy the plants are. There's plants don't make minerals. They only take them from the soil. And there's no soil that doesn't have enough minerals to grow food. There's only soil that's not alive enough with enough microbiology to make food grow. And we used to do regenerative agriculture always. It was just what agriculture was, where we would add manure, we would do holistic planned grazing, rotate crops, all these things. And we've kind of, it was the Green Revolution after after Vietnam War, where we just started, we had all these chemicals of war, these chemicals they were using to like kill the rainforest so they could see the enemy and all of that, came home and they just started using them on farming. And
Mm,
so we largely have a industrial agriculture system that is based on chemicals of war. And then we're wondering why we're not healthy. And
yeah.
so the principles of regenerative agriculture is there's six principles of regenerative agriculture. So the first is context. You have to farm for where you are. You're not going to try to grow tropical trees in Texas. The next is to do no-till. So this sounds crazy to people that are, farming, tilling. But even organic, largely the Dust Bowl happened from organic farming, right? There was no major agrochemicals when the Dust Bowl happened. We just kept tilling the ground and the soil food web, the web of microbiology, the viruses and the bacteria and the fungus that live in the soil gets chopped up every time you do that and it gets depleted and depleted and depleted. And you let all that carbon, soil organic matter evaporates when something dies, just like when an animal dies, it fills with gas and all that stuff goes up in the air, right? And so all of the life in the soil was getting killed every single year. So it's not just about chemicals, but it's about how we treat the soil. So no till, and then cover crops, keeping the ground covered, because we talk about climate change and heat. If you take one of those, remember those COVID era things that you stick at your forehead to see if you had a fever so you could have a beer at a bar? So those things, if you took one of those and you clicked it on grass and bare ground right next to each other in the same sun, there could be as much as a 40 or 50 degree differential. So when we grow, let's say, almonds for miles and miles and miles of almond trees, and we have bare ground using glyphosate or Roundup to kill everything on the ground, it's very much hotter in those orchards. But if you have grass on the ground, it's very much cooler. So cover crops, keeping the ground covered, is massively important because most of the microbiology in the soil, some can live off of decomposing matter. So one way that microbiology is living is decomposing matter. And then the other one is on a living root of a living plant. The majority of them need a living root. And we talk about carbon, carbon, carbon. What is carbon, right? So a plant is using photosynthesis and pulling carbon out of the air, pulling it down into its roots and making it into carbohydrates. Those carbohydrates excrete from the roots and feed the microbiology. The microbiology eats the carbohydrates and excretes whatever it excretes, which makes the minerals in the soil available to the plant. So always keeping a living root in the ground, so those microbiology, so cover crops. Animal integration, which is like holistic planned grazing, you might have heard of mob grazing. And that is recreating what the bison do, what the antelope do, where they are moving to new grass in a tightly packed group. So they're getting a lot of herd impact. And this, I don't know if people know that there was far more bison in the 1400s and 1500s here than there are cows today. So this is another reason we can know that the cows are not the problem. And there was all this massive soil being built, but these bison were moving in tight herds, eating, stomping, peeing, and pooping, and then moving on, and then not coming back to there until there was sufficient new forage. So holistic planned grazing or mob grazing is a way where you move your cows with an electric fence every day to recreate that experience.
Okay.
And because of that, you build soil health over time rather than depleting your fields over time. So no till, cover crops, and animal integration. Biodiversity is the next one. Is you want to always have multiple different things. Biodiversity is, and diversity, unlike what we talk about in society, diversity is like, oh, I'm have sex with different people, or my skin has more or less melanin, but we all think the same way. That's not diversity. In nature, diversity looks like diversity of function, diversity of idea. And so the every different thing has a purpose. And so we grow a 16 species cover crop that we cut for hay and we feed for forage. So that means that if we didn't get enough rain to grow the soy, the millet did great. And if it was too hot for the vetch, then the sorghum and the Sudan did great. And if it was cold and the sorghum and Sudan didn't do well, then the vetch and the clover, like these other things, are going to do well. And so you are having a stay against nature. But also, if I have pear crop and I have a sweet potato crop and I have cows and I have beef and I have lambs and I have pork, if something comes in and takes out my cows, it's not the end of my farm.
Yeah.
And so it's both, nature never has a monocrop. But so we would never want to have a monocrop on the farm.
Right.
And then the last one is less chemicals or no chemicals. And so it's context, biodiversity, cover crops, no till, less chemicals or no chemicals, and animal integration. And those are the 6 principles of regenerative agriculture.
That's awesome. Those are great. Those are great. There's in the current administration, there's the MAHA movement, the Make America Healthy Again movement. I know that obviously a big thing that they're working on is our food system and the agriculture system. Do you feel like, from the perspective of a farmer, do you feel like it's a good step, good first step in the right direction. Some of the things that they're working on. What are some of the things that maybe farmers agree with, maybe farmers don't agree with? Like, what's kind of your take on some of the things that the Maha movement is up to?
I think, I think I think I'm disappointed in a lot of things about this administration, and I'm grateful for a lot of things. And I think two things can be true at the same time. And
Yeah.
we live in a society where we don't want that to be true. And you see this a lot playing out with arguments about certain things. And, one person will be like talking about how bad Hamas is, and one person will talk about how bad Israel is. Well, both things can be true at the same time. It's not like if Hamas is bad, Israel is good. If Israel is bad, is good, then Hamas is bad. Like both things are things that are reprehensible or happening. So I think two things can be true at the same time. And what I want to say here is that we've never had an administration talking about taking food dyes out,
Yeah.
investigating the pharmaceutical industry. If you had told me in the middle of COVID that we would have Robert Kennedy as the HHS secretary, I would have thought that was the craziest thing you ever said. I think that the Doge thing came in and scrapped a lot of stuff without a lot of critical thinking or nuance. And so a lot of programs that were designed to help local farmers feed local food to local schools got scrapped as like wasteful spending.
Mm.
And so I find it disappointing that the messaging is in the right direction, but in real life, I have a friend, Dax Shepard, who owns uh, a Oatman's Flats farm in Arizona, dry farming with no irrigation, nutrient dense grains. And he set up a whole mill, borrowed $1 million to do it because he had this grant with the government to feed everything out to the schools. And they scrapped his grant and he already spent the $1 million. He's not getting his reimbursement, blah, 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 blah. I think that is short sighted. What I'm really hoping is that some of these things are going to be reinstated. I talked to Callie Means, who's a Maha,
Yep.
I think he's like the go between Trump and the Maha coalition. And so I just talked to him a couple weeks ago in DC, and I was telling him, and he said, "Yes, I know it's not consistent, and we do need to deal with that." So I think that that's frustrating for people. I think that it's exciting to have this side of the aisle interested in food policy, soil policy, and all of that, because largely it's been a left issue and it's kind of been put underneath the solar panels and all the stuff that I
Yeah,
think
totally.
I don't agree with as like an afterthought. And the fact that the Heritage Foundation did an entire day about soil health and human health and how it's an existential crisis seems really exciting to me, but I also don't want it to just be like as an afterthought to some deregulations that are also going to be harming us. And so, and I'm not into regulations, but I do think that water and soil and air could and should be regulated because they are the commons. And then I think individuals should have much more liberty and freedom than we are given at this current time.
So you mentioned like you mentioned the concern with some of the things that Doge shut down, and hopefully they reinstate some of the things that maybe were carelessly eliminated or defunded, if you will. What are some things, without me being like head deep into the Maha movement, and what they're up to, like over the next now 3.5 years or whatnot? What are some of the ways that they will have changed some agricultural practices and some common practices that are for the good? Like, do you know?
I don't know, is the Maha report out yet? I was talking to Callie about it and I've seen like some draft copies of the
Mm,
Maha report,
yeah.
but I think there's going to be a commitment to, I understand from what he was saying, a commitment to encourage breastfeeding again. I think that there's a commitment to using SNAP, it removing cookies and all of
Yeah.
these things. 20 states have already done it. Again, strange, largely conservative states that did it, but removed sugar. Not sugar, but sugary drinks, cookies, and certain chips and stuff like that from SNAP. And if it was up to me, and this is people are gonna be like, you're a communist or not a communist, a totalitarian. But I would say SNAP is a grant, and the outcome of the grant is nutrition. The goal for the grant is nutrition. So if I get a grant for a greenhouse and the goal is a greenhouse, I must provide greenhouse. I must put up my money, put up greenhouse, and then get reimbursed for half of said greenhouse. Or I must get money and then build said greenhouse and have it inspected and then, however that works. So I think that we are largely not causing nutrition with SNAP, since SNAP is the largest purchaser of soda
Yeah.
in the world by like, I mean, it's the largest percentage of the soda company's sales. And so when we look at this, I would say like 8 ingredients, 6 ingredients, like nothing that has more than that many ingredients could be purchased with Snap. And maybe if you're buying things like eggs, meat, dairy, and fresh fruits and vegetables, you get double dollars. But I don't know exactly what they're going to do, but they're going to use Snap as a way to drive people to eat more healthy things. And soil health is going to be huge on it. They're investigating vaccines, and I believe that the vaccine schedule will get less. I don't think that wherever you stand on vaccines, I'm not sure that we think kids need 79 vaccines before the time they graduate from high school. So I think there's a lot of good things that are happening. And I hope that that's amazing. And then I hear Kennedy talking about wearables or an mRNA vaccine for everybody that's like a general. I don't even understand what he meant. But I'm like, what? I'm so confused what's happening right now. But I think that I hate politics. I don't think the government's going to be able to save us. I don't think that we have there. But I think that the conversations in the world, the conversations at the Heritage Foundation, the conversations from the pulpit, the conversations from the campaign trail where Trump was talking about these things had a ripple effect. And I know that because I live in super red Texas in a rural community. And I got people coming into my restaurant saying, I was listening to Trump and then I followed RFK and I learned about seed oils and I learned that I maybe could have the ability to change my health and I've had diabetes for this long and they're coming here and looking for healthier food options. And so I believe that the best part of what's going to happen with Maha and RFK, and hopefully there's regulatory things that are helping, but I don't, the government, what is the saying that if the government says I'm here to help, run the other direction, right? But the conversations happening become unstoppable. So if people everywhere are talking about the impacts of seed oils, the impacts of processed flour, the impacts of processed sugar, then the mother in the grocery store makes different choices for her children. And I think that is really the most powerful thing. We, the people, are the most powerful. Our voting does not happen every 2 years or every 4 years. It happens every day. Whether you go to the farmer's market or you Instacart from wherever, you're voting for what kind of world you want. And so I implore you to vote for a world where small family farms don't disappear. We lost 170,000 small family farms in the last 8 years. That is a catastrophic collapse that we could, in a very short amount of time, not be able to feed ourselves. And so we need to value the family farm. We need to value knowing where our food comes from. And we've largely just outsourced it to the cheapest hourly wage all around the world. And we don't realize that that has a cost. And that's a cost to our microbiome, which is then a cost to our mental well being, our ability to reproduce, our ability to feel good, our ability to live a long time. But it's also our rural communities are being desecrated because the farm where there's thousands of acres and they're just growing corn or cotton or whatever, and there's two guys on a tractor, there's no animals. Then the veterinarian goes away, and then there's no feed store in town because they're just getting truckloads trucked from somewhere. So then the feed store goes away, and then it's not 7 families living on this land. It's now just one manager and an employee. And so then the local restaurant goes away, and on and on and on. And so the family farm is the backbone of America. and we cannot afford to lose 170,000 again in the next 8 years. But we're losing the banking products that make it possible for us to farm, and we're losing the interest for the customer to even care about us. And in some ways, farming has been villainized through the green movement and
Yeah.
also through the using politics to separate us. A lot, it's almost like people resent farmers because they probably voted for Trump, which is like silly because people are going to vote for what they think is in their best interest. And I voted for Trump thinking he was going to slow down the whole digital currency control grid, digital medical IDs and all that, and literally just partnered with Palantir and ushered it in as just as fast as Kamala would have. So I was like, oh well, I bet I rolled that dice. I mean, I knew it was going to happen with Kamala too. So I mean, I don't know that I rolled it wrong. I would have thought he would have at least pretended to slow it down. He's like, we're not going to do a CBDC. We're going to do a digital dollar. And I was like, oh, could someone tell me the difference between those two things?
But yeah, to go back to I think that, like you said, the conversations that are going on and people that are thinking about health that never thought about health, or are hearing terms and hearing words that they never would have thought about before or never heard before, and now they're actually being more mindful of it. That's 100% happening, and I see it regularly in my everyday experience. Now, this last question is kind of a loaded one, but do boil it down to however you can. So, like, the subtitle of your book is so it's Debunked by Nature, how a vegan chef turned regenerative farmer discovered that Mother Nature is conservative. What do you mean by Mother Nature is conservative?
I don't mean that she voted for Trump
Right.
Vance, if that's what people think I meant. I don't mean that. I mean, all mammals prioritizing reproduction. We don't do that. Like, so that there's one thing. Prioritizing that water and food and all those like that I talked about. But also, so in nature, we see diversity of sexual behavior, for example, but we don't see abandoning one's nature. So there's diversity of sexual behavior, and then there's saying like I'm not this thing that I am, and trying to be this other thing. So I use the example in the book. I have this cow. Her name is Camila. She has very big horns. She's kind of a loader. She likes to jump on the other cows in the male position. She's protective of the herd and the young calves when there's no bull in the field. When the bull is in the field, she keeps her distance from him, no interest. And she comes into estrus and she has a baby every year. She's an amazing mother. And she's a very different personality than the other cows. And so I would say that nature values the way we were born, sees that as having value. I would say that diversity, equity, inclusion, this conversation is largely used to divide us in the world right now and cause us to other each other and not see each other as a reflection of God. And I think that in nature, there's all this different diversity and everything has a different function, and all these different things are working together in this beautiful way. And so I think that that is like real diversity, and that is beautiful, and that is natural. I would even say that capitalism is in nature in its true form. Is capitalism is an expression of nature, and we have bastardized it and married it to the government and made it fascism. Really, I mean, fascism is marrying industry and government together, and they love to call this administration fascist, but the last one was equally as marrying industry and government together. And so true capitalism is an expression of nature. Something is supported and works in the environment, then the environment supports it. And if it doesn't work in the environment pulls it down. And that's what I mean. Like, we have the power with the purse. We have the power to say, I want this in my community. People all the time come to my farm and like, this is so amazing. I'm so glad this is here. And I don't see them again ever. And I'm like, well, they're so glad it's here, but if you don't come out and you don't support it with your dollars and you just Uber Eats from the ramen place around the corner getting its food from Cisco, then literally you'll care about my handmade noodles and my from scratch vinegar and my corn chips that we grew from scratch and made into tortillas and made into corn chips. Like, if you think that's cool, then you have to support that. And so, and that is capitalism in its most true and beautiful form. I mean, we don't value, we send our women to be feminists and go to work and don't stay home with your children and sleep with your baby in another room so you can get a full night's sleep. And mammals don't do that. They sleep with their children, they breastfeed their children. A cow, without human intervention, would let their offspring breastfeed for up to a year. We rarely, in the United States, 3 months is the average that a baby is exclusively breastfeeding. And by 6 months, they're done mostly. And around the world, it's like 2.5 to 3 years is the recommendation. I get so many looks at me for still breastfeeding my 2-year-old. And I've been breastfeeding for 10 years straight. So I don't have any cares about people's looks at this point because I've had kids back to back to back to back. So I don't even think about it. Like, I'm gonna feed my kid. And if you think she's too old, that's your business. But these are all just ways that nature is always healing itself. It's always conserving itself. It's always getting back, trying to get back to a state of cohesion. And we are kind of in a state of chaos, unwilling to get back to the state of cohesion.
No, gotcha. I love it. I love all the examples. That was all great. Well, you guys need to make sure you go grab her book, Debunked by Nature. You can go to debunkedbynature.com/pre-order. We'll have all the stuff linked up in the show notes and the description as well, obviously. You can follow her on Instagram at Talk to Mollie. Also, she's talking about this ranch and restaurant that she has at, you can follow it on Instagram at Sovereignty Ranch or sovereigntyranch.com out in Texas. So you guys need to go make sure that you go support her, go see what she's doing, go learn about some of these topics that you maybe haven't learned about thus far. The stories that she brings in the book are fascinating, they're intriguing, they're relatable, and they're a breath of fresh air, and they're talk about a lot of values and talk about a lot of things that you probably don't hear a lot about in today's day and age. So make sure you go grab the book. Make sure you go follow her on Instagram for some great stuff. Is there any other good place that people should go learn more about you and support you?
Well, I'm not sure when this is coming out, but on September 25th through the 28th, we're having a Food is Medicine conference here on the ranch. And it's going to be everything from people that work in building legislation for food to regenerative farmers to nutritionists to the top podcasters in the space are going to be here. And then in between the talks, we're going to be training people on butchering and sourdough bread and fermented foods. And it's amazing and it's kid friendly. And the kids ticket is only $50 for the 3 days. So you'll never get an opportunity to drop your kid off at a tent. And they're going to do all types of fun stuff as well, collect eggs and make butter and milk a cow. And so it's an extraordinary opportunity to be on land with people in the space. And so if you've been feeling like something is wrong with our food system or something's wrong with how I've been eating or I'm not feeling the best that I could, this could be an amazing opportunity to be in the room in an intimate way for 3 days with the thought leaders in the space that are really making a difference and educating us about how we can be healthy. Also, of course, doctors that have healed their patients, all different kinds of people. But if you go to eatyourhealings.com, you can get your tickets and see all the people that are going to be there.
I like it. Eatyourhealings.com. We'll put that in the show notes as well. September 25th to the 28th, the Food is Medicine event or whatever it's called. So awesome. Beautiful. Well, this was awesome. I really appreciate your time. If you guys are listening on Apple Podcasts, app, or Spotify, make sure you hit the follow button. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit like and subscribe down below. Mollie, it was a blast having you back on. It was a blast diving into a lot of the different topics, especially around like values in our culture and society and all that stuff, and trying to get back to some of the ways that we used to be and how the more natural state of being. I'm fascinated by that conversation, and I think a lot of people will probably be fascinated by it as well. But appreciate you guys. That's all we got.
Thank you for having me.